Hello, my name is Nathan George, pastor of worship here at Christ Covenant, and today we are looking at a wonderful figure in history. Her name is Katherine Winkworth. Some of you may have read her name in a hymnal. Many of you perhaps have not heard of her. I taught this actually to the senior class in 2018 during our summer elective, and I've sort of reshaped a few things, but I'm basically using that again. So a few of you may have listened to this before. It'll be a great reminder, and others have not. So, Katherine Winkworth, celebrating the uncelebrated. In the music world, it's well known that over and over again, extremely skilled musicians are not always the ones that make it into the popularity contest known as the national stage. Sometimes it's the teachers and those behind the scenes that are really the excellently skilled and wonderful musicians. Now, certainly some that make it to the top are very skilled. But sadly, sometimes the folks that are just so good never see the light of day. Now, being on the top of the world is not a sin. That's not the point at all. But a couple of years ago, I ran into a pretty funny website called Lent Madness. It's a spoof on basketball's March Madness. And what they do is they pull together bios from history, so different historical figures, and they make brackets, and they pit one person against this person, and then they take votes, and you get to see which historical figure wins the popularity contest. Well, it's great geeky fun. One contest caught my eye, and it was Isaac Watts against Katherine Winkworth. And so the first couple comments were, as you would expect, it's no contest, right? We've all heard of Isaac Watts. He's the great hymn writer, and he's written 600 hymns. He's clearly going to be the winner. Not only did he write 600 hymns back in the 1600s into the 1700s, he wrote a textbook, and this is its title. It goes like this. This is just the title, not the introduction. Logic, or the right use of reason in the inquiry after truth with a variety of rules to guard against error in the affairs of religion and human life, as well as the sciences. A textbook. And who could compete with this formidable foe named Isaac Watts? Well, in the corner, wearing the white trunks, is Katherine Winkworth. She was born in 1827, so almost 100 years after Isaac Watts died, and she was an educated lady who was extremely skilled in languages, in particular German. She was completely fluent in German and is credited with bringing the German choral singing tradition to the English-speaking world. Her translations are considered scholarly, very close to the originals, and artful. And that's a feat. We'll talk about that. Plus, she was witty and incisive. One comment from that website, Lent Madness, is this. When Katherine was a 16-year-old, so pretty young, a 16-year-old British schoolgirl, General Charles James Napier conquered the Indian province of Sindh. Don't know how you pronounce that, but it's spelled S-I-N-D-H, Sindh. The conquest was unauthorized, and it was actually quite brutal. When Katherine heard about it, she told her teacher that Napier's dispatch should have read peccavi, or that's Latin for I have sinned. It was a dark twist on what the dispatch presumably was, which was I have, meaning possessed, taken possession of, I have sinned. The pun was sent to a humor magazine, and it became a meme, sort of, that traveled throughout history. So, we have this young, witty girl pitted against the great pillar Isaac Watts. Who would win out? Who would make it to the next bracket? Well, Watts should be the shoo-in, but there was an upset. Out of 7,410 votes, I don't know how many geeks are out there, but there's a lot of people voting on this. Only 3,261 went to Watts, and then a whopping 4,149 went in support of Katherine Winkworth. So who is this lady? Why would she rise above the towering Isaac Watts? She worked without fanfare. Even those who write just one or two hits today have more recognition than Katherine Winkworth ever has. And she was a lady who brought the whole choral and congregational German tradition to the English-speaking world. And so even though she's been uncelebrated, she just consistently brought skill and faithful dedication to the church through a working knowledge, a very good working knowledge of theologically rich hymnody that's actually based in the birthplace of the Reformation. So several of the hymns we sing today have been given to us by Katherine Winkworth. But she didn't do so because she thought she might be a hit. It's just that she loved this stuff. Her publications did find some success, but she did it for the love of it. She loved German. She loved German chorales, presumably Bach chorales and German congregational singing. She spoke German fluently. She understood the language intimately. She loved to sing in German. And she was moved personally. And she was so moved that she wanted to bring it to her home country in England. With that body of work just came a treasure trove of theologically and devotionally profound hymnody. Keep in mind, when I say theologically profound, in my mind, that's immediately connected to a devotional stance. So she brought theologically rich and devotionally rich texts to her home country. Plus, she was a true poet, not in one language, but in two languages. And she even composed a hymn in German. So I have a couple goals here, just three goals that's not a couple, three goals to work through here. One, give you a glimpse of Katherine Winkworth. We've already started that. We're going to finish that up here in a moment. Two, I want to encourage us to be grateful for the influence of this saint and others like her. And then three, I hope to help you fall in love with a hymn. So, number one, a glimpse of Katherine Winkworth, born 1829 and lived till 1878. That means she lived a mere 49 years on this earth. And I've already spoken about her love of the German chorale, but there's more than meets the eye there. I've spoken about her ability with German. And here are some words of others about her upon her death. So other scholars writing about Katherine Winkworth. And just for the moment, think about this. There are other scholars, and think into the 1800s. There are not too many female scholars. We'll come back to that in a moment. So in 1878, the year of her death, Dr. Martineau, I'm not sure who that is, but another scholar, wrote this: "The translation in these volumes," speaking of Katherine's work, "are invariably faithful, and for the most part terse and delicate." That's high praise. Terse, meaning clear and incisive and to the point, and then also delicate. That's quite a balance. He goes on. "And an admirable art is applied to the management of complex and difficult versification. They have not quite the fire of John Wesley's version of Moravian hymns, or the wonderful fusion and reproduction of thought which may be found in Coleridge, but if less flowing, they are more conscientious than either, and attain a result as poetical and severe as exactitude admits, being only a little short of native music." Okay, that's a lot of words to say, wow, she can take German hymns and make them sound as if they grew up in the English language. And at the same time, they so represent the German hymn to be almost exact. That's an incredible feat. Anybody who has tried to translate poetry realizes you take this beautiful love poem from French and you're like, it kind of sounds like that. Or you take a great praise song from America and try to translate it into Spanish, and pretty soon you realize you just got to change the whole thing. It's just a different song. And so this feat of taking German and bringing it to the English language in a precise and yet artful way was noticed by other scholars. A dictionary of hymnody by John Julian says this: "Miss Winkworth, although not the earliest of modern translators from the German into English, is certainly the foremost in rank and popularity. Her translations are the most widely used of any from that language and have had more to do with the modern revival of the English use of German hymns than the version of any other writer. And of her character, a Dr. Percival wrote this. He was the principal at Clifton College. He said, "She was a person of remarkable intellectual and social gifts and very unusual attainments, ability and knowledge, with a certain tender and sympathetic refinement which constitutes the special charm of the true womanly character." But she was not just a scholar. Back to Dr. Martineau, he says, "Her religious life afforded a happy example of the piety which the Church of England's discipline may implant. The fast hold she retained on her discipleship of Christ was no example of feminine simplicity, carrying on the childish mind, familiar with the pretensions of non-Christian schools, well able to test them, and undiverted by them from her first love." Do you hear what he's saying there? In a day when the church leaders were distancing themselves from the true evangelicals, those people with fervor for Christ, he's saying she held fast to Christ and was a scholar among scholars. He was defending her, a scholar defending her and saying her piety was not because she was a feminine simpleton, but was based in true scholarship and true discipleship. So, she was not just a poet. She was involved in Sunday school, which in that day was still focused on teaching children just how to read from the Bible. She was also very interested in higher education for women. She consistently supported things like the Clifton Association and drawing room chats where they discussed political and current events. And so she was very interested in the day and the people that were around her. In other words, we don't really have a picture of a simpleton or a recluse, uneducated. She was a woman of skill, traveled internationally, and then she died suddenly on a trip back from Germany to her home. She died in France in 1878. Even with all that, she was not a woman who strove for popularity. She didn't attempt to release sensational publications. She was just consistent. And so what we see is not somebody on the street corner sort of out there advertising her wares. We see an academic with a love for people and a love for her subject. She would spend time in her room at home with her Father in heaven, working through these texts, sometimes just on her own. And the Father who loves his children sees all that happens in secret. I think folks like Miss Winkworth, I think of folks like her, like I do the violas and the French horns in an orchestra. They're not the flashy ones. They're not the first chair violin, but they make the rest of us all sound really good. This is somebody like Katherine Winkworth. It's a little bit like the heart. You can't see the heart pumping, but it keeps all the limbs going. So we highlight Miss Winkworth, and there are many others like her. So that's the glimpse of Katherine. Now, very quickly, I'd love us to be grateful for the influence of a saint like this. And so I'm going to just list, just to help you think through some of the hymns you've heard. She translated some 400 hymns. She wrote over 60, and we're still singing some of her work. Let me just list a couple. Number 53 in the Trinity hymnal. Praise to the Lord, the Almighty. We love that hymn. Now thank we all our God, right? Whate'er my God ordains is right. Or comfort, comfort ye my people. Lift up your heads, ye mighty gates. All my heart this night rejoices. I mean, so many things. They're just wonderful. How about, open now thy gates of beauty. From heaven on high I come to you. Jesus, priceless treasure. And it goes on and on and on. We need to be grateful for the influence of these folks. They've shaped generations of theologically and devotionally minded people for years. She's influenced the church for over 200 years, and it's been massive. I would love to introduce to you, sort of in closing, a hymn that I love. In fact, we sang it once this last Christmas because I wanted to get started, but it's called Comfort, Comfort Ye My People. And to introduce this, I want to read from Isaiah chapter 40, the first 5 verses. Comfort, comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and cry to her that her warfare is ended, that her iniquity is pardoned, that she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins. A voice cries, in the wilderness prepare the way of the Lord. Make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Every valley shall be lifted up, and every mountain and hill be made low. The uneven ground shall become level, and the rough places a plain. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. Now, with that in mind, comfort, comfort ye my people, I'm going to read just some passages from this great hymn. Comfort, comfort ye my people, speak ye peace, thus saith our God. Comfort those who sit in darkness, mourning neath their sorrow's load. Speak ye to Jerusalem of the peace that waits for them. Tell her that her sins I cover, and her warfare now is over. You can just hear the beauty rolling out of this. Let me read the second verse. Yea, her sins our God will pardon, blotting out each dark misdeed. All that well deserved his anger, he no more will see or heed. She has suffered many a day. Now her griefs have passed away. God will change her pining sadness into ever-springing gladness. I love this hymn, and I'm going to play for you a version that I recorded last Christmas. I hope you will enjoy it and love it as much as I do. My people, speak ye peace, thus saith our God. Comfort those who sit in darkness, mourning neath their sorrow.